Hey, what's up guys? Today, I'll show you a crime thriller drama film, The Countess. Spoiler ahead, watch out and take care. The movie begins with Count Istvan visiting the late Countess Erzsébet's grave at Ext. As he looks upon Erzsébet's grave, he narrates the time of the past when she was still alive. In 1560, Erzsébet was born in Ext, Hungary. She was a daughter of a noble military general. On her christening, she was immediately promised to marry Count Nadasdy. During her childhood, her mother taught her to embrace coldness, cruelty, harshness, and curiosity in the world. Such traits showed visibly to everyone. She felt no sorrow when her father died, and even dared to touch his corpse. She planted a chick inside a pot, thinking it would grow in a tree, but her teacher explained that only seeds are planted in dirt, whereas humans and animals suffocate when buried. During her youth, she attended a baby boy's christening in church and desired to marry him. However, her mother opposed the idea, for Erzsébet would be too old when the boy reached the marrying age, and besides, she was to marry Nadasdy. However, she fell in love with a peasant who later impregnated her, but Erzsébet's mother forbade such foolishness and ordered the peasant's death. She had to watch the brutal death sentence against the peasant, and afterward, her mother locked her in a room as punishment so they could hide her pregnancy. When Erzsébet's baby was born, her mother immediately took away the child, even though it was against Erzsébet's will. At age 15, Erzsébet married Nadasdy, but it was followed by Erzsébet's mother's death. Erzsébet grew old as a wise countess. She managed her estate masterfully and became wealthier to the point where the nobilities and even the town's king owed her and her husband money. Later in life, Erzsébet and Nadasdy had 2 daughters and a son. However, the couple barely spent time together, for Nadasdy was busy with a war against the Turks' army, who slaughtered and enslaved half the population of Hungary for less than 50 years. Later, Erzsébet founded a hospital for the poor, but townsfolk noticed that the majority of her patients never came out alive. Erzsébet was a Protestant who believed in heretic theories. She had a claimed witch working under her, helping with managing her wealth, to the extent that people thought she knew how to create gold. Nadasdy's deadly military prowess and Erzsébet's intelligence combined made them the most feared, respected, and influential family in the kingdom. After a fearsome battle against the Turks, Nadasdy returned to Vienna and demanded the pending payment from the king. Unfortunately, the king lied, saying they were preparing the money, but they were short of it. The king offered to stay for a while, but Nadasdy couldn't wait and asked the king's men to follow up on the payment instead. When Nadasdy and his men left the king's castle, the king's attendant gave him a golden chalice as a gift from the king. Meanwhile, Erzsébet played with her children in the forest, and upon hearing her husband and his men arrive, they excitedly welcomed him. However, Nadasdy returned home with a disease contracted from abroad, and he died on the same day. The following day, Erzsébet attended her husband's burial ceremony in the local church. Later, she went to Vienna with her children and left Countess under the witch's management. At Vienna, Erzsébet talked with the king about the court's recognition of her as the sole owner of her husband's army and Countess estate, which the king eventually accepted. Afterward, Erzsébet visited her aunt's mansion to leave the children there. She first shared a humorous dinner with nobilities, and among them was Count Jargi. After dinner, Count Jargi offered a marriage proposal for her, but it would be improper for Erzsébet, for she was a noble by blood, whereas he was a count by marriage. Her aunt then fetched Erzsébet, and they attended a night ball. At the night ball, Erzsébet met Jargi's 21-year-old son, Istvan. Erzsébet elegantly danced with him until the music ended. There was this burning passion brewing in their hearts that led them to wrestle their smelly tongues. And when it was time for Istvan to go home, Erzsébet invited him to a furious hormone night in bed. The following morning, the unsatisfied Erzsébet caressed Istvan's hormone-filled skin, but withdrew her hand when she saw her wrinkly skin. Before Erzsébet left, Istvan gave her his necklace and promised her written letters weekly. For the first time, Erzsébet felt love and hormones to fill the emptiness in her heart. Erzsébet returned to Countess and relayed all the happenings with Istvan to the witch. However, the witch only warned her that a young hormone-rich man like Istvan changed their mind all the time, and there was no certainty that he loved her at all. Erzsébet wished to be alone and stared at herself in the mirror. She sighed, for how time has no respect for beauty. Then she received another letter from Istvan. Not long after, they met again and entangled their bare hands and legs in bed. Istvan shared he was to marry a baroness from Denmark, but his heart belonged to Erzsébet. When Istvan was asleep, Erzsébet cut off and smelled a strand of his hair, but unfortunately spared his smelly sausage. A week later, Erzsébet visited the church and prayed. The church's priest thanked her for the donations, and she only said it was only right that God had given her too much. Outside the church, Erzsébet waited for Istvan's letter. While waiting, a young beggar complimented her dress, and out of generosity, Ursebet gave her a golden ribbon. The following day, Ursebet finally received Istvan's delayed letter containing an invitation to a ball. Ursebet attended the party and waited, but no familiar face arrived. While waiting, Count Dominic spoke to her, but Ursebet showed no interest in continuing the conversation. Amidst their conversation, a servant called her, saying that a man was looking for her. Ursebet gladly followed and met Istvan again, but he couldn't stay with her longer that night. But he promised to elope with Ursebet tomorrow and that they'd be together in the coming days. Soon after, they parted with a soft tongue massage and left the ball. The following day was nothing Ursebet expected. She waited until sunset, but Istvan stood her up. She left him a letter expressing her disappointment and pain. It turns out, Count Georgi locked up Istvan in the cellar because he learned his plan to escape with Ursebet. Georgi believed that Istvan was just another minion of Ursebet, but Istvan believed she loved him, and so his true love for her. Istvan resisted following his father's wish to travel to Denmark to meet his future wife, but Georgi lied, saying Ursebet had already forgotten him and chose to spend time with Dominic. Back to the present, Istvan narrates that after the separation from Ursebet, everything he knew about her is only through relayed stories. He only learned the truth about Ursebet from his father, who was on his deathbed. In between his father's screaming words, he realizes that what people know about Ursebet are lies. Back in the past, Ursebet still waited for Istvan, but Dominic kept on pestering her, so she accepted his invitation eventually. They rode horses, chatted, and encountered an elderly beggar. Ursebet shouted at the beggar for being ugly, and the beggar responded that sooner, Ursebet would become old like her. So Ursebet punished the beggar in front of everybody out of anger. Ursebet returned home in a sour mood. She smelled Istvan's hair to keep herself sane, and prayed to the Lord, asking why her true love disappeared so quickly. That night, she cut her left bosom, inserted Istvan's hair, and sewed it close, for she wanted to keep him forever in her heart. 3 weeks passed, and Ursebet, the powerful countess in land, was ill from being heartbroken. Such news reached Count Georgi, and he wished to find proof of Ursebet's lunacy. Ursebet finally received a letter from Istvan, but it was about his farewell for her and his devotion to his new wife. The letter's content angered Ursebet, but the witch calmed her down and pleaded with her to forget about Istvan. But Ursebet persisted that it must be their age difference that caused their failed relationship. She even compared herself to the young maid in her bedroom. Suddenly, Dominic visited Ursebet. During the meal, Ursebet got furious when the servant spilled some drink onto her clothes. Ursebet wanted to punish the servant, but Dominic stopped Ursebet and instead offered himself to be the target of her anger, so he allowed Ursebet to whip him with a belt. The following day, Ursebet drowned herself with sorrow again and thought that the beggar in the park cursed her to be old and wrinkly. She even shouted at the witch for giving her ointment that wasn't effective anymore. Afterward, Ursebet asked the young maid from yesterday to brush her hair when she unexpectedly pulled Ursebet's hair too hard. Ursebet's anger triggered once more, to the extent that she beat the young maid with a brush and the maid's blood splashed on her face. Ursebet wiped off the blood in front of the mirror, but stopped as if a miraculous event occurred in her very eyes because she saw her wrinkly face glow younger. Everything Ursebet saw in the mirror of glowing and getting younger were mere hallucinations, but she firmly convinced herself that bathing in a virgin's blood could help her attain eternal beauty of youth, which her sycophantic servants tolerated and insisted that the blood did miraculously work. However, the witch was against this idea, but Ursebet continued to harvest blood from the healing wound of the young virgin maid. However, when her wounds completely healed, Ursebet ordered her servant to cut her open and extract blood from the cuts. Unfortunately, the maid died from blood loss after many harvests. So Ursebet ordered her servants for more virgins. Her sycophantic servants captured virgin maids and maidens in town and killed them inside a cage with deadly spikes. This torture weapon design aimed to impale maidens' bodies without wasting too much blood. Back to the present time, Istvan tells everyone that despite his numerous letters sent to Ursebet, he never received one from her. He'd have thought that Ursebet might be doing well with the war, but little does he know her evil doings. Back in the past, Dominic slept with Ursebet for a night. When she was finally asleep, Dominic roamed and searched the castle, but the witch caught him. They fought about being Ursebet's favorite person, and Dominic bragged that he was Ursebet's current favorite. But despite the witch's opposition to Ursebet's drastic changes of personality and desires in life, she continued to guard Ursebet's back, especially against an ambitious man like Dominic. Years had passed, and too much death occurred on the estate, causing the villagers to panic and believe that a devil must be living among them because of the scattered maidens' corpses in the woods, because there was no more space for proper burials. The wolves feasted over the rotting corpses, and flies occupied the once beautiful place. It was one morning, and Ursebet was updating her journal, filled with precise records of every murder. She wrote that the peasant blood was too harsh for her skin. While writing, the witch was sick and sought Ursebet's presence, but Ursebet declined the invitation to see her. Meanwhile, the townsfolk addressed the murders to the priest and speculated it was Ursebet's evil acts. So that night, the priest sent a valet to deliver a warning letter to the king, and he wanted to escape with the donations. But the king's attendant caught him, saying that the priest betrayed Ursebet. He ordered his man to chase after the valet and killed the priest. That night, Dominic, who slept with Ursebet again, sneaked into her torture basement while she was asleep and found Ursebet's journal, which was crucial evidence. Ursebet woke up and found her servant panicking. She informed Ursebet that Dominic escaped with the journal and that the witch had died. The following day, Ursebet read the last letter the witch wrote for her, containing her devotion for Ursebet and how nothing is permanent in the world, but there is beauty when time lets it. So Ursebet decided to visit her children in Vienna, but the town folks mobbed her Ferrari coach and named her a witch. Ursebet returned to her castle because of the mob and let a valet fetch her children. At home, she was ill from blood withdrawal, and so her servants brought a young girl that night. But Ursebet recognized she was the young beggar because of the golden ribbon. She grabbed her arms and shouted at her to leave this place, or she would die. The young beggar escaped the castle, but upon reaching the woods, Dominic killed her. Along with him were two aristocrats. Dominic gave the two aristocrats to Ursebet's servants for Ursebet to kill. Ursebet faced the two aristocrats, but one of the aristocrats turned out to be Istvan's wife, who oddly said that she hadn't seen Istvan for years. Out of anger, even though it was against her to harvest from a married woman, she slitted Istvan's wife's neck. The following day, Georgie invited Ursebet's children and her aunt to see the young beggar's torn corpse, and claimed it was done by Ursebet herself. Meanwhile, peasants from the COUNTESS estate arrived in Vienna to address Ursebet's tortures and murders done to a priest, maidens, and aristocrats. However, the king showed no interest in resolving such issues until his servant explained that if Ursebet was proven guilty of using witchcraft, the king would be clear of his debts to her and could seize her estate. The king's attendant, who eavesdropped on the conversation, entered Georgie's office, and inside were Dominic, Georgie, and his son Istvan. He immediately informed Georgie that the king learned that Ursebet was suspected of murders and witchcraft. But Georgie made an alternative plan. He let Ursebet's children sign an agreement, allowing the court to charge their mother with murder, but without mentioning the witchcraft, for them to be able to inherit COUNTESS castle, but the rest of the estate and military would go to Georgie. This agreement might sound unfair, but this would leave Ursebet no choice but to agree for her children's sake, or else the king would take everything from her and her children's welfare. Georgie sent his son and the king's attendant to investigate if all the speculations were true. Istvan and the king's attendant arrived, and Ursebet welcomed them with a warm dinner. However, flies continued to disrupt their meal, but little did they know it originated from hidden corpses. It had been 5 years since they saw each other, and Ursebet wished to be alone with Istvan. Soon after, Ursebet confronted Istvan with his farewell letter, containing his love for the Baroness of Denmark, but Istvan denied writing such things. Istvan realized his father had fabricated the letter. The two shared a muscle wrestling on bed, and the moment Ursebet was asleep, Istvan and the king's attendant searched the COUNTESS castle for evidence. Truth couldn't be hidden, for they found Ursebet's torture basement and a room of corpses. The movie ends with Ursebet and her servants facing trial and punishment for all the murders. Her servants suffered from immediate death for being Ursebet's accomplice in killings, and Georgie chose to destroy the evidence for Ursebet in order to have an untainted name in the town. Afterward, she signed an agreement to bequeath all her possessions to Georgie, to cede COUNTESS to her children, and free the king from all his debts. Before breaking her up completely in her room as punishment, Ursebet commented how Georgie masterfully orchestrated a plan just to obtain wealth. She believed she'd meet death with sanity and not a lunatic, unlike Georgie's description of her to others. As Ursebet suffered inside the bricked room, she asked the Lord how men were praised when they murdered others, while she, a woman who murdered the same, was sent to jail. Ursebet committed suicide, for she could no longer handle the agony of biting off her flesh. The church didn't give her a coffin, nor a proper burial, but only dumped her straight into the dirt and buried her. In the present, Istvan leaves Ursebet's grave and wonders if all the accusations of her being a bloodthirsty murderess are true or just fabricated lies by his father. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.